Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hire Moment Mastermind. I'm Cheryl Lotzar, your host. We are delighted to answer your job search questions today. I'm joined by Tenny Good, who is an expert in federal government resumes. She works with Corliss Jackson. Vern Schellinger, who is a expert in networking and connection, and Rick Webb, who is a recruiter for government contracting. And I am a recruiter myself, but also a career coach and love to do career branding. So with that, before we get going in the Q&A part of things, we are actually going to talk a little bit about interviewing today. Tenny, Vernon, Rick, and I were having a nice little conversation before all this got going and talking about interview tips, things that you guys might not even think to ask about, but we as recruiters, have a particular perspective. So Tenny, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and happy Friday. In our conversation today, we were talking about kind of the basics of interviewing, and I was sharing that in some coaching this week, had a couple of trying situations that I thought what I would just kind of bring to light that might be helpful. Client was wanting to express attributes of strength, of calmness, of being able to handle diversity, which I think are great attributes, and I think questions of that nature can certainly come from potential employers. But the concern I was getting was he was using real scenarios, but he still had a lot of emotional charge with those scenarios. So it was not that it was a bad STAR story. And again, STAR stories being situation, task, action, result, but he was bringing a lot of emotion that was still tied to those scenarios. So we had to kind of talk through that it wasn't about what he was saying, but how he was saying it. And he had some great points in the stories, but again, I would suggest one of my tips is use realistic stories, absolutely, because those are genuine, those are sincere, but making sure that if you are communicating those to a potential employer, that some of the negative emotions that might be tied to those is not coming out in your communication as well. And sometimes that means just resolving that in your own mind, that it was a lesson learned. It might have been a wrong fit of a situation. It might have been a wrong relationship as far as a supervisor worker relationship. Find the positive in this situation to be able to communicate it and use it in your job search in a positive way.
Yeah, it just to echo that, Tenny, it's personal for you, but it's not personal for them, right? When they're asking you these questions and they're looking for your past-based experience, it's really to see, your skill set. It's to see how emotionally resilient you were, your soft skills, behavioral skills, and how are you going to fit in, right? And so to the extent that you can really give them a solid story that's not emotionally charged will indicate to them that you're going to be a good fit in their culture, right? So you want to just strip it away and having kind of mapping it out, like writing down these stories, situation, task, action, result. Even you can do it even in a spreadsheet if you want to, just to keep yourself going. The other thing about that is that it's when you're bringing up one of your STAR stories, make sure that you're answering the question that was asked, not just giving a story that you think is a good story. Right? So you might have all your stories at the ready, but unless you actually can pivot it a little bit to hit the target, you might be off target, right? So make sure that you are customizing. Sonia?
Sheriff, when you say emotionally charged, can you be a little bit more detailed on what you mean by that?
Sure. So let's say there was a story and there was something negative that happened in it, because look, every story has a challenge, right? That's kind of the whole point of a story, is you have to have an arc. You have to have something to overcome. Well, in your overcoming of something, you're telling of the story, very often what'll happen is, oh, well, so-and-so did such and such, or I didn't appreciate when so-and-so said such and such, or especially if it has to do with your reason for leaving, anything like that, where there is some emotion involved with it, right? You want to try to be as objective as you possibly can be. Does that help? Jennifer? You're on mute.
funny that you're talking about this right off, because I'm about to have a conversation with a sheriff who was on a podcast. Well, yeah, he was in a conversation on the radio, and I listened to the podcast for the first time, hearing him and another person, a councilman, and they do not get along at all. And the sheriff was talking before the councilman came on the radio show, and he was doing okay with his voice. But as soon as the councilman came on the radio show, he was charged with motion. And even though he was in the right, the way he portrayed himself with that much emotion on this guy who took the calm route, the professional route, he came out the loser in a sense, in my book. So, it's content, it's presentation. And so, yeah, I want to do a one-on-one with the sheriff just to say, try to stay away from this guy with one-on-one conversations, because it really hurts you unless you can get the motion out of it. So, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Vern, I know that you had some tips as well before we got started here.
Yeah, one of the things that I always talk to clients about in interview prep is again, there's always some piece of the interview where you have to expect the unexpected. While we all know interviewing has some real commonalities from organization to organization, there's always the culture of the organization. There's always the skills of the interviewer, him or herself, that you're dealing with. And some people just haven't really learned how to conduct good interviews. And I had a personal example. The last interview I was on in my career, I was interviewing with the chief financial officer, and he started the interview by bemoaning the fact that the person who had retired, and this was why the position was open, was so loved by the whole company, and how much pressure he was under to replace this person with somebody just as good. And this went on for a long time. It felt like 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe it wasn't that long, but it felt like a long time to me. And I'm saying, how is he's supposed to be interviewing me and finding out about me and whether or not I can, fill this job and have the skills. And he's talking about the person that's retired. And so sometimes, and we've said, as interviewees, be aware that you can ask questions during the interview at any point in time if they're appropriate. And so my question to him was, tell me about the behaviors and the actions of the person that retired. Tell me about how did Howard become so beloved by the whole, organization? What specifically did he do? And then when he started to give me examples of what Howard did, then I was able to answer with a star story of my own experience that pretty much matched what Howard did, hoping that he'll hear this and say, "Oh, okay, this person's just like Howard. I want to hire him." So you just got to be, interviews are nerve-wracking to begin with, but that's just another dynamic that you could come up against. And so be ready to ask questions if you need to in whatever the situation is.
Thanks, Vern. Rick, you also had a tip?
Yeah, just a couple things. One, obviously preparation is so key to an interview. Each interview is different and each job's different. So you have to prepare for each one specifically. So if I ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself, you need to have an elevator pitch of 1 to 2 minutes to tell me how your skills relate to the job. But I can tell you, I've had people in interviews that have gone on for 6 minutes telling me irrelevant information. And honestly, I just kind of start daydreaming. I'm just telling I'm not perfect. But so it's really important to prepare each time when you go to an interview and what they want. And then say you go to me for the first interview and I'm going to put you through. It's okay to ask me, what can I do to improve for this next interview? What should I focus on? You use me as your ally. And then the final thing is, when I have someone that I interview that may not be perfectly fit for the job, which there's there's very rare 100% fits. I'm looking for someone that's confident yet humble in their skills, someone positive and respectful, and just someone that can articulate how their skills will fit the position and their ability to learn. If they can demonstrate ability to learn in other skills, and I can see how that's happened, that's going to help me sell that to the manager that's looking for this one certain skill that, you know, he or she may think is irreplaceable. But on my side, I have to, you know, do my job to sell the candidate and why they are a good fit.
Yeah, that's great. And then this harkens back to stuff we've said in the past around making sure that you have thoroughly researched this job, that you have read this announcement up and down, backwards and forwards, analyze it. Don't just read it, because I know these jobs, like, kind of, they all look alike. You're looking for a project manager job, they all look like project manager jobs. You're looking for, you know, it's actually not the case. They customized it. They wrote this job announcement for that job. That summary of the position, not the responsibilities, but their summary, should really tell you a lot if you really read it carefully, the nuances of the role, right? What they're looking for, that's the problems that you're going to be solving, kind of the why, right, behind this role. And so if you really pay attention, what you'll be able to do is then customize your stories in advance a little bit, right, to fit the role. You'll be able to ask better questions. You know, everything you do needs to be tailored. Your resume tailored, your custom cover letter tailored, your interview tailored. You're not just interviewing for any job, you're interviewing for that job, right? The things that they want you to do. The other tip I wanted to give is, because I've heard this my whole life, please don't interview for the practice. Can I just let that hang in the air? Don't interview for practice. It's a waste of everybody's time, right? You can practice with your colleagues, your friends, a job club, wherever, right? But if you interview for the practice, you're basically, you know, giving a false impression, a false hope to that employer that you actually want this job. Just like you wouldn't want them interviewing you for the practice. You don't want them doing a courtesy interview. If you're interviewing for the job, you're presuming that they're actually really interviewing you. Okay, it's a relationship. So make sure that and I would say it this way. If you believe that this job is 80%, that's the litmus test. 80% of what you want, the role, I don't know if, you know, sometimes they list compensation, sometimes they don't, the industry, geography, whatever. To the extent that it's 80%, then yes, absolutely interview. And, you know, if you're just looking for culture fit and more nuances, okay, absolutely. Because you don't know, nothing's perfect and you don't know. You have to interview, you have to try it out. But don't interview if you absolutely know this is not your job. And then the second piece of that is every interview you have, if you decide at some point it really isn't the right role for you, bow out gracefully. The last thing you want to do is go all the way to the end just to get the offer and then turn it down, right? Again, it's not a good use of your time or their time. Just like you wouldn't want them to do that with you. I know that it seems like it happens that way, but it doesn't. I mean, an employer is going to only spend the time with you and take you all the way to the end if they really believe that you could be the right fit, okay? Same thing with you. And if you bow out gracefully, they'll respect that, you know? Not to say you can't turn down an offer, but they'll respect it even more if you let them know early on or earlier on. And then, you know, they may be able to consider you for other positions. In fact, they'll be more willing to consider you if you're really graceful about that. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you don't get the offer, be very, very graceful and professional in how you respond, okay? You don't want any emotion around it. You want to thank them for their time, appreciate it. And I know a lot of your instinct is to ask either then or afterwards, why didn't I get the job? Can you give me any feedback? Look, for risk mitigation reasons, most employers are very reluctant to do that, okay? Because they really can't, they feel like they're at risk. And sometimes it's a culture fit, sometimes it's whatever, things that they just even can't really talk about. It might be that they say, you know, somebody else had more on target skills or industry background, and that's fine. But you really want to stay away from getting that kind of feedback. And the other thing too is, even though your intention might be very good in wanting to get the feedback, the experience with a lot of employers is if they've ever taken the risk of giving feedback, sometimes the candidate has an emotional reaction. You may not think that you will, but sometimes you might. And that's not going to be good for your relationship. Okay. So if you want interview feedback, again, job club, colleagues, what have you. But it's very unlikely that the employer is going to give it to you. And even if they do, you're going to have to really be in an emotional, spot to handle it well. Okay. All right. Those are some of my tips. So questions. I think we have some here. So negotiating salary when the job is a 1099 contractor, no benefits. I can't say I'm looking for a total cash compensation package. Because okay, so the range for a job I'm interested in a little lower than what I'm looking for and worth. So actually, Julie, do you want to give a little bit more color around that? Do you want to lift your mic?
Sure. Just want to know, generally how to approach the salary negotiation when salary is really the only piece that there is to negotiate, because there aren't any benefits. They're hiring you for a certain number of hours per week. It's not like you get vacation per se if you're
Right.
a 1099. So how can you negotiate that off the bat when it's different than if you're negotiating for a salaried position?
Well, it's true. But the thing is that phrase, just to clarify, that phrase, that total cash compensation package thing, I mean, no, you wouldn't say that, obviously. But you still can, the whole point of that phrase is to start high. In other words, it's to put down a number that's at the top end of your range, right? And then you can go lower than that. So it's the same thing with 1099. If you know that there's an hourly rate that's really kind of your target, then that's what you would say. If they ask you, what are you looking for? You'd say, I'm seeking, an hourly rate of X on the higher side. And they can always walk you down. They can always say, well, we can't do X, we can do Y, right? But conversely, if they don't ask you what you're looking for, but they just offer it to you. So they say, oh, I don't know, I'm making up a number, $50 an hour, whatever it is. And then you can say, well, thanks for that. I was actually looking for something closer to $60 an hour. Does that make sense? And then they might meet you in the middle, that kind of thing. So the point of that phrase is start high and you can always walk down. And if they start lower, then you try to walk them up. Is that helpful, Julie? You're on mute, but hopefully that was helpful. Okay. All right. So Julie, any other follow-ons to that?
Yeah. I was just wondering how much over your what they're offering you could start as a percentage. Do you have like a rule of thumb?
I wouldn't say percentage. I'd say this. If it is, I'll give it to you this way. If the rate, okay, I'm going to put this in annual salary terms. Okay, so you'll just have to adjust it. But if the salary is below 100, you want to be thinking in $10,000 increments. So if somebody says, 70, you can say, well, I was kind of hoping for closer to 80. Okay. So in your case, Julie, I don't know what your numbers are, but let's just do this 50 to 60 thing. That's still, roughly in that range. So I'd say, if they say 50, you can do 60. If you're over 100, you can go maybe even a little bit more than that. You can, somebody says, hey, we're offering, I don't know, whatever it's 110. You can say, well, I was kind of, more in more like the 125-ish, kind of a range, what can we do? And then over 200, then it goes into like $20,000 increments, roughly speaking. That's not anything you're going to read anywhere. That's just more my experience talking. Tenny, Vern, or Rick, would you have any other comments on that?
No, I think that's good advice, sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So other questions we have here.
Thanks, that was helpful.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. All right, so Dia says, by the time I've tailored everything for the job, I've become too emotionally invested in it. Any tips to quickly divorce yourself from all the mental investment when you don't get the job? That's a great question. And it is a dance. It is an emotional dance, a little bit. And all I can tell you is that you want to keep a little bit of space mentally or emotionally for the fact that it's not necessarily going to be yours. Okay. Think of it more like, and I don't know if this is exactly the right analogy, but think of it kind of like dating, right? So you're dating somebody and you're hopeful. You like them, they like you, and you're kind of going along. You don't know you're going to get married, right? It's a possibility out there. And I understand that breakups are not easy, okay? But there's no assumption when you start the dating process that you're going to get married. It's still a question mark. So think of it more like that. Like, we're trying each other out. I'm giving it my all. They're giving it their all, hopefully. And we're going to see what happens. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But we've dated for a while, in this case, 2 or 3 interviews, and then we'll see what happens. I hope does that help you a little bit?
It does somewhat. I came in second and it knocked me off my feet a little bit longer than I wanted it to. I think I was setting myself up for too much.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you never know, right? It could have just not been the right fit for you. Because sometimes what happens in these job searches and it can happen for the employer too, but certainly for the job seeker, we can have what's called a halo effect. Okay. It's an unconscious bias. And the halo effect means that and this could be for not just for jobs, just in life, but let's say just for a job, where you kind of put rose-colored glasses on, right? Very normal to do that. You're looking for the things that you like. Oh, well, I really like the manager, the bullet number 5 on the job description, whatever. And then all of a sudden there's a story in your head that says, oh my gosh, this is like the best job ever, and I gotta have it. Reality is that there's always, challenges. There's always stuff that you can't see, that you're not allowing yourself to see, because you've got a halo effect. Because otherwise, why would you want to take the job if you didn't think that it was a great job? Okay, so just remember that nothing's perfect. And if you didn't get the job, it just wasn't your job. There could have been things that you're just not aware of that were behind the scenes that did not come out in the interview. Could be the role, the culture, whatever. And, God didn't mean it for you. Right. So I just kind of keep that in mind, like, oh, maybe I just dodged a bullet here. Make sense?
Yeah, and Cheryl, let me add to that. I mean, it is an emotional roller coaster when you're going through this process. And when you invest all the time and energy and effort,
Yep.
and you get all the way to the final step and you're one of the 2 finalists, I mean, you're almost in your mind living that job. You're thinking already about the problems and the issues and how you might, solve those problems. And so it is an incredible, letdown when you find out, you came in second. It's okay to be upset for a period of time, meaning 24 to 48 hours. Don't do anything, if you want to be frustrated, yell at the wall, whatever, but you've got to recover from that, because the last thing you want is any of that negative kind of emotion to carry over into the job search that now needs to be continued. You need to get back up to your positive self and, speak with confidence and with everybody you're meeting with, and certainly in the next interview you have.
Great advice, Mark. Tenny?
I think, go ahead, Tenny.
No, go ahead, Rick.
No, I just wanted to say that this is easier said than done, but you need to know in your heart that a job does not derive your self-worth, and that tying your self-worth to a job is maybe not the best thing to do, and it's easy to fall into that trap. But if you get to that place, you need to get to places where you can build that self-worth back up, and that's with your family, with friends. There's a lot more to self-worth than just the job, and I think it's important to know that. And just like Shira said, not every job is the right fit, right? It just may not be the right fit. It's kind of like, when I was younger, I wanted to be a professional baseball player, and I went to a tryout with the Phillies, and I saw I was I was super slow. I thought I was fast, but they were like, no, you're too slow for professional baseball. I was like, and I kind of just was like, you know what? I shouldn't tie myself to becoming a professional athlete. And so it's part mindset. You just have to realize that you have value regardless of this specific job, whether you got it or not. And so it's an important thing to remember, I think.
Great point, Rick. Very great point. All right. So let's see if we have anything else. Nope. Marvin says, I interviewed last Tuesday. They want me back for a second interview. I did get a call yesterday, was told they want me, but the salary is a lateral move and I want more money. How do I deal with that? So Marvin, can you let us know, have you had any salary conversations with them? In other words, did they ask you what you were looking like? Tell us with the salary up until this point, what's been the conversation?
Right. The interview went well on Tuesday. They did ask me what was I looking for. I told them, I'd like to think about it. And it was like understandable. So yesterday I got a call and from the personnel lady that I know. And she was the one saying that they're going to be back for a second interview. So they're just trying to look at their schedules for next week. And their numbers look somewhere around about, the low 100s. So, but that's just a lateral move. It's a great company. I definitely want to go in and work for it. It has a lot of room to grow, but I just don't want to make a lateral move.
So did they ask you, did they ask you already what your salary expectations are?
No, they did. And I asked them to let me think about, what I want to do for a cash compensation package. And they was like, that's fine. So
okay, so you haven't said anything yet, but then
no.
how did you find out what their
I know this one lady that works there who's in personnel. So she called me like, hey, listen, you didn't hear this, but they're bringing you back for a second round. And, the director of safety want to meet with you. And, the job that they're looking at, because the one that I interviewed for, they don't have it approved just yet. So some sign off still has to happen before they can get it and get funding and everything. So they want to put me in another slot, and that slot would just be a lateral, move. And I don't want to do a lateral.
Okay, you're talking, it's lateral just in compensation, correct?
Yes.
All right, so you already know, they said what? They said low 100s, right?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I know this is a public forum here, but if you don't, since we're talking money, and you'd be looking for more like what?
With all that they want to do, I'm looking somewhere around the mid 100s.
Oh, that's a pretty big jump.
Yes.
From what? Okay.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then, and do you have a minimum?
I do have a minimum. I'm anywhere from 130, 150.
Got it. Okay, so here's the thing. What I would then, now of course you realize if you do this, you will be, risking not getting the role. Okay. But you can say before going back to the second level, look, to help you make a good decision about my candidacy, I wanted to let you know that my compensation and my total compensation expectations are in the mid 100s. Okay, or you can say close to the mid 100s, which will make them go, whoa, right? In which case they're going to come back and say, we were looking at the low 100s. And then you can say, well, what's the highest you can go for this? If they say 130, which they may not, because low 100s is far away.
Not 130, right? If
they say 130, then you can say, well, okay, that's something that I would accept. Don't say 130 off the bat.
Right.
In mid 100s, let that. So you're here, they're here, and then you say, what can you do? And maybe they come to here, and you see where that is.
Okay.
Make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. All right. Other questions?
Sure, may I make a recommendation to him as well?
Please, Noreen.
Sure. Hi. One of the things that I've seen in the past is when there is a position where they're waiting, Marvin, for funding, you can negotiate an opportunity to go in a lateral with a written contract guaranteeing that you can move into the higher position, and then they will backfill your current position. I come from a large corporation and they were very willing to do that because of budgetary funding, et cetera. So that may be an option, not sure, just to throw it out there for you.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Sure. All right, we had oh, Sonia?
I have a question.
Oh, actually, before we go, is it a new question?
Yes.
Okay, actually, we had something in the chat first. Let me
Okay,
go
I'm
back.
sorry. I'm sorry.
No
I'll
worries. No
stay in
worries.
my lane.
All good, all good. Yes, so we had a question about cover letters, right? How to structure them. So first of all, some of you I don't know if you've ever heard me say this before, but cover letters are read only 2% of the time, okay? But they are read 2% of the time. There are some recruiters who are very insistent on them. And because of that, you need to write cover letters. Let me just emphasize that. But the cover letter should be very, very thoughtfully crafted, okay? 1 page is great. You don't have to go any more than 1 page. But the key areas, you want to customize it, okay? So you want to open with something. I mean, you can do the traditional, I'm delighted to submit my candidacy for the position of X, fine. But then you want to go right into the why, right? So maybe you're aligned with their mission. Maybe your skill set is really on target. Maybe there's something that's really interesting you about what they do, okay? And so it's important to kind of in that opening paragraph have kind of a little bit of a one-liner as to why you're interested. And then you can go into in your second paragraph, either a continuation of why you're interested, or more importantly, why you're qualified, okay? And while you're qualified, you want to customize that to the role, very much so. In fact, what you may want to do is like right after your second paragraph, say, following are some of my accomplishments that directly relate to this position. And you could do one of two things. You could either have a bulleted list where you kind of repurpose some of your accomplishments on your resume, right? So like on your resume, everything's third person, like directed or developed, right? But you can actually use first person in your cover letter. So you can say, you have a little bolded skill that they wanted. So the skill they wanted was financial analysis or something. So you say financial analysis or budget management, whatever, budget management in bold. And then you would say, I've successfully managed budgets of over X million dollars or whatever it is, right? And you have 5 or 6 bullets that are the specific skills that they listed on the job announcement. Then you have, on your cover letter. The other thing you can do that I've seen be effective is a table, okay? A little actual table. You just stick it right into the middle of your cover letter. One column says your requirements, and the second column says my qualifications. That's very effective because then it shows that you've really customized the cover letter to that particular role. And then you would, sign off with some paragraph around, excited to meet you and contact information and that kind of thing. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, Shira, just one other emphasis that you said is, only 2%, read, cover letters, but 2% do read cover letters. And the fact is the job seeker, you don't know whether that organization is one of those 2% or not.
That's right. Take the time.
You
Don't be generic about it. Don't be generic. Customize.
Yeah.
I would also add to that. I mean, I think I've said it before on this group is that I, as an HR, I loved cover letters. I just love them because it tells me, I always said, as cliche as it sounds, the resume really comes from your brain. I mean, that's your knowledge, your skills, and your ability, but the cover letter kind of comes from your heart. When I can read a cover letter that's well written, I get a sense of that person and that person's character if written in that way. So I would always suggest a cover letter because it does no harm, right? Some creative ways I've seen people do cover letters is I've seen people write them in a way such as, of course, I want to work for your company. I've been a customer of your company. I've utilized your services. I know you. So now I want to be a part of that team. I've heard people write cover letters in a way of reading really about the company and where they stand on their values and their ethos, and people putting that in the cover letter of, I really admire company X for being kind to the environment. That's something that I value and that I've been a longstanding support of. And so you're making those connections for that company to see you as a person. My other tip on cover letters is please read them out loud. before
Yes.
you send them, because you definitely get a sense of I love me, don't you too? If you read it out loud. And even though you can use first person, it's good to use that we and I see you, and using again those relationship building words to make that cover letter again more of an introductory of who you are and what you can do for that organization.
Yeah, another way that I've often expressed exactly what Tenny has just said is the resume is a two-dimensional piece of paper where you're listing your skills and your experiences. As Tenny said, and that's two-dimensional. You are so much more in terms of your whole being and your whole person. And what Tenny was saying was the cover letter gives you an opportunity to show a little bit of that beyond what's on the resume.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Sonia, you had that had a question.
Okay, thank you. This is good information even for me. So I have a question on this, on interviewing. When you have a lot of experience, and I know a few people on here join me in 20 plus years of experience, and you're very good at what you do, and you know it, your performance reviews and people responses to you say that. How do you communicate that talking without sounding arrogant, overconfident, braggadocious, whatever you want to call it? How do you communicate that? And as a recruiter, are you offended when people talk about how great they are?
Rick used a term before that I often use, and I call it humble confidence. Okay. So humble confidence basically is like, I have the skills, but I'm also open to learning. I don't know it all. Okay. And that's really the kind of the tone that you want to set, Sonia, is not just, you don't tick off of your fingers and you say, well, I've done XYZ PDQ, don't you know? You specifically address the pain points in that role, right? So in other words, you're not just saying, I've been there, done that. What you're saying is, okay, so again, let me give you an example. All right. So let's say, okay, actually, this is a great example. So I mentioned I'm a recruiter, right? So I was picking up a search the other day, and it's a search that is slightly outside the norm for me. I mean, I can totally do it, right? But it's not in my traditional industry. So, and so what happened, like the job, the role is something that I've done before many times, but I haven't done it really much for this industry. So the employer was asking me about my qualifications for it to do the search. Sorry, excuse me. And so I said to her, I'm like, look, I said, I've done this role, this particular role, and my experience relative to your industry is this. Now, she didn't care about all my other industry experience. She didn't care about all the other jobs, other kind of roles that I've searched for. She wanted to know very specifically my quals for this role, this industry. So I was very, very targeted in how I explained it to her. So I've done this, and I was kind of like, well, let me tell you what I have done. I've worked with people who are in this sector, and this is why I know this sector. I haven't done a lot of searches in it per se, but I have an appreciation for it, and here's why. So my point is that you customize your responses to that role, and you don't just laundry list all the things that you've done. You cater and you address the specific pain points that they've shared with you. Does that help? Tenny or Vern or Rick?
Well, I mean, it's a fine line between, obviously, when you go into the interview, you want to be confident. You want to be confident in your skills, and you're trying to express, that you're proud of your accomplishments, and you've done this, and it was a challenge, and here's how I overcame that challenge, and so that's just part of the interview. The other thing I would say is, sometimes when you get those, tell me about a time when, or they might give you the question, well, here's a problem we're dealing with in this, organization right now. How would you approach that? So if you were making the mistake that you're talking about, Sonia, you would say, "Oh, I can handle that. I've taken, I've done that a million times. No piece of cake, right?" Versus, well, I don't. You begin again humbly confident. This might be a good example. Well, I don't really know everything about your organization at this point. I only know what I've read and what I've learned. But based on what I know so far, here's how I'd approach that. And I believe this type of strategy, could possibly work here in your organization. You don't go in there and say, "Oh, I can do this, no problem."
Well, that's not, I'm not saying I can do this, no problem, but the roles that I'm interviewing for are the top HR roles. 9 times out of 10, they report to the president, CEO, and it's a mess going on right now because they don't have that leadership. So I'm trying to convince them I can come in and take that situation, because everybody hates HR because it's so emotional, and it's half and half. It's half emotional and it's half legalistic and compliance and all of that. And so it gets emotional for the leadership because they don't want to deal with the people and their problems and this and that. And I can come in and take charge of that because I have the experience. I've been in the field for a long time. I've been at the table. I've been on the board of directors, the whole works. So it's hard I don't know where to pull back and say, as you say, be humble, because I don't want it to seem like I can't do it. And I'm trying to find a way to balance that, to let you know I can do it, but also not make you think that I think I know it all. It's a hard situation for me. And I've been trying to practice that because I need to find a way to balance it, because just like I forget her name, the lady who said she lost, she was one of the top 2. I think that was you, dear. I understand that. I've been the top 2 so many times. I'm like, I just feel like that's my permanent role, and it does. There have been times when I just say, okay, fine. There have been times I had to take a week to recover from it because I just knew I had it. And so I'm trying to find a way to balance this situation because, I'm not basically aggressive. I have my personality is collaborative. It always is. And, but I'm trying to convince the people I can do the job. I can do it well. Pick me. That's all I got to say.
Sonia, I can say that I look for someone with a subtle confidence, right? I don't need someone to tell me how good they are. I want them to show me. And you can show someone that through the questions that you ask, right, how you would solve and solution things. But if someone says, "Yeah, I'm good at this, good at that," I'm like, okay, well, anyone can tell me that, but let me come to the conclusion this person knows what they're doing. I mean, they have it together. And when you approach like that, I think it's much more effective. I mean, you can still let them know you have experience in X, Y, and Z, but from the interview, articulate how good you are. Not saying I'm good, but by showing them.
Well, actually, to be more specific, show it in your stories.
Right.
Yes.
Tell
Right.
the stories of what you've done, then you're going to be shown. It's not saying I am great at this and this and this and this. That's not the laundry list that you want. You want a story here and a story there and a story there. And then through the stories, they're going to understand your competencies.
Yeah, and Sonia, the example you said everybody hates HR. It's legalistic. It's this, and the leadership, the CEOs, they don't want to deal with it because it's all these people problems and stuff. you know, can you convince the leadership that, you know, yeah, there's all these challenges in HR, and here's a story that that gives you an example of how HR, led by the right person, me, you're not saying that, but can solve those problems. Right?
Okay. Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. All right. Dia, did you have a question?
Yeah, it took me a second. I wanted to just run back to the cover letter real quick, and I typed it up in the chat. How do you pick the top skills that you want to put in there? I mean, are you picking like the top 3 or 4? I've just struggled with trying to find.
Go with the ones that are in 2 areas. In the qualification section of the job announcement, which is at the bottom, go for the top 3 or 4 bullets. Those are the most important ones. Okay. And specifically hard skills and industry. So hard skills meaning the things you do, like budget management, financial analysis, project management, those kinds of things. Industry experience, you would want to put in one of the opening paragraphs. Okay. But you don't want to emphasize soft skills in your cover letter or in your resume. You don't want to be talking about, because they're going to mention it in the job announcement. They're going to say, oh, team player, great communication skill. That's not what you want to do. Okay. Because that'll come out in the interview. Those are almost like throwaway terms. They're nice, but that's not what you want to talk about in the cover letter. Okay. So hard skills, like what you've done.
Thanks.
Alan?
Hi, thanks. Good morning, everyone. I found a job listing yesterday that I would like to submit. It's a communications job. I'm a communications professional, but it's in a field that I haven't been part of for a decade. But that job a decade ago shares a lot of the same responsibilities. My question is, on my resume, do I change professional experience to relevant experience and tack it on at the bottom? Do I create a separate section for relevant experience? How can I go about adding that on there?
On your resume, yeah, you can go ahead and actually say, you don't even have to say relevant experience. You can say, I don't know, can you tell us what the industry is?
Yeah, this one would be in healthcare. So I've been
So healthcare. So I would say healthcare related experience, and then list your experience. And then underneath that, prior experience, and then list your experience.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? I think, let's see here. Linda had said that you finished a temp gig, and a friend suggested getting a reference from the boss at that gig. No, I think that's fine. I mean, you can go ahead and ask. Absolutely. Now, I would go first to the temp agency and say, hey, is that okay to do? Because it is their client. So that's the most appropriate thing. And if the temp agency can give you a reference, even better. I mean, not even better, but that's fine. That's fine as well. But just say, sounds like I did a great job. Would you mind if I went to the employer and asked for a reference or a recommendation? Okay. All right. And then we have another question here about cover letter. Is it better to take a less is more bullet approach or jam that one page with all the information? No, less is more. I would say, again, about a half a dozen bullets would be good. Nothing more than that. Yeah, so you don't want to list, 20 different things, just the ones that you think are the most important. Okay. All right, other questions? All right, well, I mean, we can certainly wrap up a little bit early here if nobody has any other questions. All right, so if that's the case, going once, going twice. All right, so as most of you know, I end this call with a prayer call for those of you who want to stay on the line. So we'll go ahead and officially end this call. Actually, before we do, I just want to make sure that everybody knows where you can find the recording of this call. So give me just a moment. I'm going to put in the chat box where you can find the recording. Give me a sec. All right, so here's the link for the recording, which should be up in the next few days or so. All right, and so we'll officially end the call for now. And those who want to stand for the prayer call, you're certainly welcome to do so. All right, have a blessed day, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Oh, come on. What the hell's going on here? There we go.
Okay. All right, everyone. Good to see you here. Okay, so let's go ahead and take some. But let me just let me stop the recording.